If that one is there, and we have the terms of reference of the consultant, then we should transfer those to what Sekabira was supposed to learn?
No, we'll not do transfer things. We are not going to assume. Let us look at the documentation and see what it says, other than assuming. Yes, Nathan and then Francis.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Betty, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Chair.
You'll be the last, and then I make a ruling on this.
Chair, yesterday, Mr. Sekabira said he has a file, and on that file, there's information. I want to ask the person in charge of archive, is Mr. Sekabira's file here, or it is among the files you transferred to Mbarara? What is so hard that you cannot get Mr. Sekabira's file, and you get the documents which are on the file?
There will be no answer now. Let's have all the question. You answer, and then I rule on it. Francis?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sekabira was executing the work of Bank of Uganda. And whenever he went to execute this work, did he just carry a memo and say, following this memo, I have come to execute? Because when you go to execute work, you must have an instrument. If you come to a bank, to Greenland Bank, wherever you went with some instrument. So that you're there officially. So did you just carry a memo? Did you just carry an ID? Otherwise, maybe the governor may want to tell us whether that is how Bank of Uganda operates. That there is no official way of working. Everybody goes on duty the way they want.
Procedure, Mr. Chairman. And if you give me time, I would move to the specific rule. Mr. Chairman, moving under Rule 205 D, Roman numeral 2, which says, in the exercise of its function, is a committee shall have the powers of the High Court for comparing the production of documents. Mr. Chairman, I want to move to ask whether it is non-procedurally right for the committee to compare the production of the personal file of Mr. Sekabira, that is with the Bank of Uganda, such that we can be assisted to see what exactly is contained there, and how could it be missing with the appointment letter that you got as the agent of the liquidator?
I think our powers under both Article 90 and Rule 205 are not in any way in dispute. It is only that, have we reached that point to invoke those powers? That is what is. But and that it is a preserve of this other side. But before I make that decision, can I hear from the Honorable Betty first? Then I can make a decision on both Article 90 and 205, which are actually in pari-materia. They are the same.
Thank you, Chair.
So,
Mr. Chairman, by law, a liquidator is an officer appointed. And to me, by that definition, when you are appointed, you must be given an appointment letter telling you of what you are supposed to do. And when I look at most of these people, most of them are putting on the lapel pin of Rotarians, where I think they should follow the 4-way test. I don't know why they are taking a lot of time, kind of thinking that we are here on this committee only and keep in this room for many days or months. Because what I see is that we are going to spend like 2 months on one query. And when the people are here and they are old enough. I want to go by the rule that has been read and Article 90 of the Constitution, so that we get out of one query and we go to another query. Thank you.
First of all, I'm not a Rotarian, so I don't know what four-way test is. I'm hearing of it for the first time. Two, of course, it's a light moment. That's a light moment. Two, we need to make progress. You know, yesterday, Governor, we spent the first 2 hours around on this thing almost like 1 hour or so. And I remember adjourning, I said the first business will be this. So I'm reluctant I'm always reluctant to invoke these powers because sometimes it's not necessary. But if we have this sort of conversation going around and around, then the committee finds a way of how do we facilitate this process to go forward. Can we have, whether Honorable, my colleague calls it assignment, Mr. Sekabira called it appointment, the Honorable Yandala calls it a memo. Can we have it now? And after we have had it, we don't have to go over something which should be very simple. Do you have other copies?
Chair, what is that?
Just 1 second, just 1 second, just 1 second. Do you have other copies? Okay, now put this one, you go back to your desk, and then you read to what you've given us. I think there are 3 documents which he has handed over to me, and now that he has other copies, you start with the earlier one, so that we now follow, all of us follow. We see whether this amounts to what we require or not.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Governor.
Which one are you starting with, sir?
The earlier one is the memo dated 8th May of 2000. A memorandum dated 8th May, the year 2000, from the Executive Director Supervision to the Governor, and it reads: liquidation of Greenland Bank Limited. We refer to your approval of 17th March 2000 of the operations policy guidelines attached for realization of the dates of Greenland Bank Limited in liquidation. Deloitte & Touche, the appointed agent, has commenced the process of date realization, although finalizing the process is bound to take a long time. Given the high cost involved, it is our proposal that Bank of Uganda should start building its own capacity to take over the assignment in the near future. We propose that this be done by assigning a full-time staff from the Bank of Uganda on attachment to Deloitte & Touche in order for them to understudy the process and procedures of liquidation. In my view, seconding our own staff will be cheaper and more effective than hiring an outside consultant. We shall also acquire capacity to deal with our other closed institutions after the audit firms have resolved the major issues. For this purpose, the function at its management meeting proposed that we second Mr. Sekabira of supervision function to Greenland Bank in liquidation on attachment to Deloitte & Touche. Mr. Sekabira is an excellent performer and supervisor and a good manager. He will be required to understudy the consultant with a view to take over the operations after receiving adequate training by Deloitte & Touche in 2 to 3 months. Mr. Sekabira has worked in Bank of Uganda for 10 years. He's a senior banking officer 1 with a master's degree and is left with the final part of the SCCA to qualify as an accountant. He is also known to be very honest and very serious with his work. Because the job will involve taking on heavy responsibilities, I propose that a suitable responsibility allowance be given to him. I propose that he be given the equivalent of a daily per diem of shillings 45,000, which will increase his pay from 930,000 shillings per month to shillings 2,280,000 shillings per month. This pay is much smaller than the money we are paying other resident supervisors. The proposal has been discussed with Deloitte & Touche, and they agreed to the attachment and the training of our staff. I am forwarding the proposed staff's name and suggested top-up of salary for your consideration. Signed by the Executive Director, Bank Supervision. This memo was received in the Governor's office and approved. After the approval, it came back to the Office of the Executive Director Supervision, who put a note on it and said, Acting Director Commercial Banking, please follow up with Mr. Sekabira and the Finance Directorate, the Finance Function. That note is dated 17th of May 2000. Chair, I also submitted a second document which is the actual memo that gave me the terms of reference, and it is dated 20th of July 2000. It is from the Acting Director Commercial Banking.
Chair, maybe before we go to the next letter, can we find out who approved this letter?
The Office of the Governor.
The Office of the Governor does not have a name of a person who approved. Who in the Office of the Governor approved?
It was approved by Dr. Louis Kasekende. The second document I submitted is the actual memo.
Mr. Chairman, have we received the approval? I have not seen the evidence of the approval Mr. Sekabira is talking about.
Actually, it is endorsed on the letter itself. Approved as requested, Dr. Louis Kasekende. It is on the letter itself. And then some other person sides down. Who is this? Please follow up with Mr. Sekabira and the finance. And the finance function. And then I say signature also down. Who is this one? On 7th of May?
That is the same person who sent the memo to the Governor, Edward Kachimbo Mugwanya.
Yeah, because you see, if you are reading a letter, all the endorsements, read them, because colleagues don't have this. You've just given us only one copy. Meanwhile, we just send it around to. Let's go faster, sir.
The second document I have submitted is the memorandum dated 20th of July 2000, which has the terms of reference for the Greenland Bank assignment. It's from the Acting Director Commercial Banking, Mrs. Justin Vagenda, and addressed to me, Benedict Sekabira. And it says, terms of reference, please find attached your terms of reference as a minimum guiding tool for your new assignment at Greenland Bank in liquidation. Please note that management reserves the right to adjust the terms of reference as and when it deems fit. You are therefore requested to bring up any issues that may not be covered in the terms of reference, as long as such issues are beneficial to the smooth running of your assignment at Greenland Bank. The terms of reference were also attached. The third document, Chair, was the appointment letter that I received in 1989 when I joined the bank. It was dated 4th of April, 1989. Should I also read that in full?
The terms of reference?
No, the appointment letter.
That was appointing you as staff of Bank of Uganda. Our concern is the appointment as an agent of the liquidator.
Colleagues, why we require this, the terms of reference, is to know the mandate Mr. Sekabira had, especially to the next question, which necessitated us to invite Mrs. Matovu, Mr. Opo, and Mrs. Vagenda. Because remember, Mr. Sekabira had said that he was forwarding reports to his supervisors, and that's what necessitated us to invite them, given that the governor could not recollect receiving reports from Mr. Sekabira. Now, before we go to what these files, actually, can I have those files which were laid on table brought back here, because we are going to give them back to them and they show us what we want from their own files. Can I go to the question, Mr. Sekabira, therefore? We have seen the terms of reference you had. Were you required to look at term of reference number 3? Term of reference number 3, and read it out.
Says, make quarterly progress reports on GBL liquidation to Executive Director, Bank Supervision through Assistant Director, FMI RRR, and Director Commercial Banking.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sekabira did inform this committee that he was making quarterly reports to you. Can we get it in the affirmative whether it's true or not? I'll start with Mrs. Matov.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Sekabira used to make regular reports to the department, and we received them, and some of them were forwarded to the governor's office. And on a quarterly basis, we used to draft board papers in which one of the items to report to the board was the status of the closed banks. Again, this report used to come from Mr. Sekabira, who was our representative and liquidator in the closed banks.
How many reports were made to you?
How many reports?
How many reports were made to you?
I don't know that it is numbers, but there were reports.
When somebody says many, it means numbers. How many reports were made to you?
There was Bank of Uganda exit strategy for closed banks in liquidation, distribution to creditors of closed banks.
No. You see, we are talking about status reports as envisaged by the term of reference, which are supposed to be quarterly, and it is called progressive reports. And maybe at this point, but we are going to continue from there. Colleagues, the files which were laid by Mr. Sekabira yesterday, where we had a little bit of a long conversation, they have been brought back. The auditors have gone through each and every file. And on this file, there isn't a single report. They're here. All of them are here. There isn't a single report, progressive report, on the files you people laid yesterday, Mr. Sekabira. They are here.
And Chair, maybe to add on what you're saying, a single or authenticated report, also which is maybe stamped or received from the governor's office.
They're all here. So, and I remember I said, please don't give us stationery, because it was time. We are asked, where are the reports which you made? They're here. Because what I see here, can I have the auditors go through? Because I've had the opportunity to discuss with the auditors. Auditors, please.
Thank you, Chair. We looked at the files. There were files for giving status of the loans. There were also files giving, showing requisitions for liquidation expenses, and files showing legal cases. Look at the files, for example, the status of the loans. You do not see who prepared the document and when it was prepared and who it is addressed to. The requisitions for liquidation expenses, we will not consider those as reports. What we consider as reports of liquidation would be reports that provide the status of affairs from, let's say, the position when the liquidator assumed the role, the liquidation agent, what was the status of assets, and what is the status of the assets at the time he's reporting to the supervisor. Thank you.
I have just gone through them this morning, and I don't find any, because these were supposed to be progressive reports being made quarterly to the supervisor spelled out. So unless, Mrs. Matovu, you have the reports, as we talk now, all this, and actually I would request that Mr. Twinemans, you withdraw your documents, because they don't serve our purpose.
I wanted to find out from the directors whether they were ever satisfied with the reports as being progressive reports.
But before you talk about a report, there are no reports. So you don't go to the satisfaction. I just want reports. I'm going to have one colleague, then I see Mrs. Vajenda's hand up.
What I wanted to emphasize, Mr. Chairman, since you have brought the files to them, and they think what they gave you are reports, let them get their files and give you those reports as per our requirement. If they think they are the reports, let them get them. We as a committee, we believe those are not reports.
The reason, Honorable Gonzaga, why I brought the file back, laid them on table and say, Mr. Twino, because he's the spokesperson, and Mr. Sekabira, have your files. If you think there is a progressive report, you get it from there and say, this is the progressive report, this is the accompanying letter, to so and so, here you are. As it is, I don't see anything there.
Yeah, so I think Mr. Chairman do that ceremony. They pick them, they take their report.
We will not have a ceremony of picking.
Of course, it's another function of its role because they brought big files, think that there's some content in them and some substance. And once the auditors say, as the auditors stated,
no, there is content and there is substance. What is not there is the relevance.
The relevance of the content there is not there.
But the content is there, the substance is there. But the relevance to what we are interrogating is lacking. No, but I didn't give any the microphone.
Because I'm seeing they're trying to pick
okay, let's make a progress. Can I have... Let's hear from them, and then we take a decision after hearing from members.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Governor, I want to give a chronology here.
Mrs. Bajenda.
Yes, I want to give a chronology to let you know the report.
Just listen to the chairman.
Okay.
Let's finish one point, because we don't want to go into stories which are not relevant. The terms of reference and some of this communication, I think it's endorsed by you? Yes. Actually, you're the one who forwarded the terms of what? Of reference. And what we want, look at term of reference number 3. And you told us that when you came, you are ready to answer this question, and I said, no, wait until the right time. And the right time is exactly now. We asked for progressive reports. Where are the progressive reports? Forget about the chronology, it is not necessary. What we did is just progressive reports, and we proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Governor, to my recollection, and there were progressive reports. How were they made? They were made to the board. Yeah, I'm trying to explain the process.
Please, Mrs. Rajenda, let us not go into a ping pong. There is an officer at the closed banks. By his terms of reference, he's supposed to be making progressive reports, and it says, I may read it, make progressive reports on GBL in liquidation to the Executive Director, Banker Supervision Department, through the Assistant Director, FMIRR, whatever that means, and the Director, Commercial Banking. The board is not in this. The board comes at the end of the what? Of the process. We want a nexus. A nexus means a link between Mr. Sekavira and the what? And the bank. Before you take us to the board. So can we have those reports?
The reports were, Chair, through the Governor, the reports were submitted by Mr. Sekavira to the Office of the Director through the Head of Division. These reports would be summarized and reported to Governor's Office. That's what I can say.
Let me tell you, I think we have a problem here. And I want to direct colleagues, we don't want accusations here. It will not help us to move forward. What we want is somebody took a responsibility. Can we have Mr. Sekavira's reports to you? Now that you seem you're the one with them, do you have those reports?
Myself, Chair, I don't.
Mrs. Matov, do you have those reports?
I don't have them here, sir. They must be in the bank.
Colleagues, me, I'll stop here. I don't want...
Mr. Chairman, I think let us clear one thing so that we know what we want. What was expected to be in the progressive report? Because Mr. Sekabira and his colleagues submitted those papers which you say are not relevant. What was expected to be in the progressive reports so that we can know what we are looking for? Maybe that is part of that. Let them tell us.
You see, we've subjected these documents to professional analysis of the Auditor General. So it is not what was expected by the bank, but what does a profession do when he has been given an assignment? Because some of the documents I see here, the whole file is about requisition of money. There are requisitions of money here, one of the files. So can we have Honorable Tosime? I'm just going to follow the order.
Thank you, Chair.
The device is in a very awkward position because once I've jumped to this side, I have to... Okay, it's fine. Let's have Honorable Tosime.
Chair, if I'm not mistaken, I've just heard from the former EDS, and she said she does not have the reports because she is no longer in the bank. I therefore want to ask the current EDS, because I'm sure by the terms of reference here, the reports were to go to the EDS. And I'm certain that the outgoing EDS or the retired one handed over to you. Therefore, it would be fair to ask you whether among the documents that were given to you, you received these reports. Because for me, Chair, this is an accountability committee. What strikes my mind is even for a person who has paid an allowance, who was paid by the bank and given terms of reference and payment, Mr. Chair, that took over 8 years. And among the duties to execute, it was to make reports. And we do not have reports, but payment was made. Do you have reports?
Please answer.
Mr. Chairman, through the Governor, no, I do not have. And as just to give you evidence, I'm willing to submit a copy of my handover report that was given to me listing the files that were handed over to me. And you, Mr. Chairman, will be able to confirm, or your committee will be able to confirm, that these reports that are being referred to were never received by me or not found in the office I occupied.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Mboine Tunemans, why did you submit those files as reports if you are saying now that you don't have reports? And I believe you are an experienced person in what was being demanded from you. Why did you hand in files that were not reports?
Mr. Chairman, when we were requested to compile these reports, I asked the officer who was then responsible for compiling them to put them together, and that is why I insisted that he present them in person to this committee.
Did he do so? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, in the circumstances then...
Let's follow the order. Because you see, if I do like this, then I have a problem on who I should... Please. Just, we need to give each and every colleague a chance to ask a question. I need to be fair. Somebody who has not spoken before should also have an opportunity to speak or seek clarification. Honorable Wanywa, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't want us to miss a point. We heard from Mrs. Matovu. She said she has been receiving reports. And when you asked again, Mr. Chairman, she said some of the reports are not here. I'm seeking clarification from Madam Mrs. Matovu. Do you still have some reports which are not included in the documents that are here submitted?
Just pull the microphone here, Madam.
I said the reports might be in the bank. Might be in the bank.
Where else could they be? Where else could they be?
They are in the bank.
But the executive director, banker supervision, has told us this and you remember when they first brought these documents, were seated up in the other committee room. Mr. Sekabira said he would not table those files until he has had an opportunity to what? To look at them. I remember at that time colleagues wanted the file tabled, and I said, no, let Mr. Sekabira have an opportunity to what? To look at them. Indeed, he looked at them, satisfied himself that those are the reports, which in our view were not, and he brought them yesterday. Many colleagues were saying, we want to know what is in there. I said, hold it. We submit them to the Auditor General. He looks at them. First, now we are talking from a well-informed and professional standpoint. So, Muchala Matov, Honorable Mrs. Matov, Honorable colleague is asking, because the only place where these reports can be is the bank. We don't expect you to have these reports in your houses. This is government property. This government property, you couldn't have left with reports to go with them to your what? To your houses. And I imagine if you are leaving, you leave them, but you leave a record. That's why there is what they call hand over. Say, yes, I left report A, B, C, D, and because a handover report, you're entitled to go with your own copy. Are you Mrs. Matov?
I did not have that report of handover, but most of the files, most of the reports were on file when I left the bank.
Mr. Chairman, there's a disconnect in the submission. That's why I'm tracing the documents from the officer. I don't know whether she was already put on off, and that what she's telling us is the truth. Because if what she's saying, we needed to know that handover report, where you submitted, and you are telling the committee that indeed you received the reports, progressive reports from Mr. Sekabira. Is that true? Can you be on oath on that?
Okay. Mchala Matov, we are going to start with one by one, then we can finish with the officer. Did you hand over your office when you are leaving?
Yes, I handed over to who was coming in.
Who was coming in. Did you hand over these reports? Are they in your handover report?
Not in particular.
So why do you say they were reports and you didn't hand them over and they are not in the handover report?
I handed over my work to the person who was coming in.
On that one, I have no further question. Can I have our colleagues come in here?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm actually also asking something to do with handover. Usually in any office you have particular files speaking to a certain task. Honestly speaking, there should be box files for quarterly reports. We call it files or soft copies, but they should be there. But anyway, let me go to the issue of handover, since we are talking about handover. The supervisor who left the bank, I think Miss Mujenyi, Bajenda, handed over to someone. The person you handed over to, in my view, should produce those quarterly reports. And there should be clear files, not mixed with anything else, but properly marked quarterly reports. That's how I think offices run. And I think the person who took over from Bajenda should be the right person to produce these reports.
But I don't know whether you forward the question of holdover to Sim. He asked the person who took over that very question. And he said, do you have that, do you have that quarter report? Do you have it in the box? Do you have it? I'd asked the Honorable to Sim. Let's finish this before some other person goes.
Chair, when I asked the question that Honorable Vincent is referring to, the EDS gave us a copy of his handover report. And among the items listed, and interestingly, for each bank, it was chronologically arranged, the documents regarding each bank that she handed over. Apparently, what we are looking for is not among the issues that were handed over. But however, the other interesting one is that Mrs. Bajenda raised issues of challenges faced by the bank. And among them, there's one called governance and unethical conduct. If I may read, the financial sector continues to face governance and unethical challenges across the board. This includes concealment of information, provision of misleading information, and possible collusion. There may be need to strengthen the market intelligence section of the directorate. So for me, Mr. Chair, from this one, from testimony given by the outgoing EDS, I'm not surprised that there is probably collusion like she says, or provision of misleading information, or concealment of information.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair. No. Ladies first.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted some clarification from Mrs. Bajenda. She said our office will receive reports from Mr. Sakabila, and these reports will be summarized and forwarded to the office of the governor. I just want to know whether these reports from Sakabila remain as for Mr. Sakabila after being summarized, or they now remain to be from those of the EDS since they are summarized.
Thank you, Chair. Through the governor, once summarized, they go to the office of EDS and they go to the board. When you look at the board minutes, that's what I wanted to explain, Chair. When you look at the board meetings,
Mrs. Sekavira, the board is at the tail end, please. And sorry, Mrs. No, you are seated together, and I think we needed this laugh. We needed this laugh. Mrs. Bajenda. Before somebody talks about the board, let me speak the language which you actually know, the asset movement. I'm sure that is now a common word in banking, asset movement. Before you look at the closing end, How did this asset move from point A to point B? Now let us trace that. Because you see, we have a problem when, do they appear, those reports you're talking about, in your handover report?
Chair, I would like you to let me finish my submission.
So long as it is relevant to what we are asking.
It is. Chair, through the governor, I was responding to the honourable member question. We make quarterly reports. We call them financial sector status of the financial sector to the board. In that status, when the board meets quarterly, we have a whole chapter, a section devoted to closed banks. That's why I wanted to talk to you about Greenland in 1999. When you look at the board minutes, you will see that executive director at that point in time presented reports, status reports.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You see, if you present a status report, it is a summary which should be coming out of your report. Now we want exactly yes, and please continue with the yes. We want that yes to lead us to where the one you summarized from. So, did you come and have yourself as an author of a report without a report from your agent? And if so, because that is the risk you run, that we are having a report you have taken to the board, but we are not having a report which originated what you took to the what? To the board. Instead, you are pleading the board. That's the risk you run, and it's a very dangerous risk, especially to the person who went to the board. This material she took or he took to the board, it must have originated from the agent. Now, when we are asking you, unless we have to sort this out, these reports, are they in the handover report? You handed over to your successor?
Thank you, Chair, through the governor. When you look at that handover report, you will see files of closed banks. Files of closed banks had all the information on closed banks. It might be a presentation issue to say that status or progressive reports from a liquidator, but when you go through each closed bank, all the information is there.
No, but you see, your successor is saying he did not receive. What he received, because you see now, what you are saying, there is a disconnect.
Sorry, Chair, through Governor, let us explain, because the processes are different. Because we are all going to understand the process, Chair, I beg. Governor, every file, that's why I took time to describe each file, and they were in EDS's office. We have archives, and we have important files kept in EDS's office. When you look at that handover report, I said, in your office, there is file A, TEFE, it is there, TEFE, Greenland Bank, UCBL, please take time to read them. It's in my handover. I could not say that progressive reports saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and he signed.
No, let me tell you what you handed over, because it is in detail. What you handed over is in what? In detail. And this is Greenland Bank, is the subject of discussion. You handed over Greenland Bank legal issues. Do you have that file? Get on the microphone, sir.
Yes, I do.
You handed over Greenland Bank legal audit report.
Yes.
You have it?
Yes, sir.
You handed over assignment final draft.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over special audit final report.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over Statement of Affairs, 30th June 2016.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over suit by shareholders and other associated companies against Bank of Uganda and Attorney General.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over legal audit report on Greenland and its associated companies.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over financial statements, audit and investigation of Greenland Bank as 31st March 1999.
And its appendices, yes, Mr. Chairman.
And it's what?
Its appendices.
You handed over Greenland Bank Forex Bureau audits.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
You handed over sale of movable assets appraisal reports.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay. I'm making it. I'm putting a star there, and it's going to. Mr. Katimbo, there is no reason to get excited about this thing. This is public function. Then you handed over transaction audit interim progress report. It was only one.
Yes.
Is it there?
Chairman. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Now we are talking about two files which we have to examine, because what Mrs. Vagenda is talking about could only be related to those two files. That is sale of movable assets. Okay?
That's correct.
And transaction audit interim progressive report.
That's correct.
You are the one with these files?
These files are in my possession, yes, in my office.
Do they include reports from the agent of the liquidator to the bank?
No, they do not include quarterly reports. As you will see, report X, which is E part X, is just an appraisal report of the movable assets. Those were things like cars and motorcycles owned by Greenland Bank.
Can we therefore have, how soon can you have these reports, these two files?
These files can be brought to you. Copies can be made and delivered to the clerk of this committee this afternoon.
Not even this, just make instructions, they reproduce them and bring them. So, Mrs. Vagenda, from this list, where are the progressive reports which we are talking about?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Governor, the reports, the progressive reports, in those files which I handed over are there. When you talk of legal audit, as an example, you find that anything to do with legal, the progress on the legal issues of Greenland Bank is stated in that report. When you talk about the statement of affairs, you find that every, the financial status, the liquidator's report, at that point, that was 1999 of Greenland, you will find a section there. When you talk about...
Okay, we are going to sort this, gentlemen, colleagues, and can you accept this? Can we have the original files here? Don't make copies. Okay? I think this sorts out this problem. Okay? Colleagues, do you have any objection?
Who's going to make the photocopies for us?
Sorry? No, what we are saying, we need those copies here. And can you... let's proceed in a systematic way. Mr. Twinemans, can you cause those files to be brought here, such that we know what Mrs. Vagenda, what he's saying is correct or not? We need those files brought.
Mr. Chairman, when Madame Matov was submitting, she hinted on something to do with the summarized reports. to the extent that they could receive the reports from the agent as the directors, and then they would have a summary forwarded to the governor. So what we are faced with is a question whether, one, there were progressive reports made. Two, we are not withheld or misplaced. So, Mr. Chairman, as you make that order, we need to be clear on which do we need the summarized format, because at least with Madame Matovu, she would summarize and forward to the governor.
No, Mr.
I don't know of Madame Bajenda whether she would also forward, but the confession of the governor was clear to the effect that he never.
But I have already ruled that let us have those files here.
Yes. We want the original from the liquidator, the agent.
Yes.
Clear.
Cause those files to be brought here.
Chair, Bank of Uganda is just across, and they have means.
Honorable Babadiri has not said anything.
I have not said anything. Thank you very much. We are looking for the progressive reports. And the author of the progressive report is here, that's the agent, and Mr. Sekabera. Can he tell us whether he submitted those progressive reports and to whom, so that we can trace? He is here. Let him tell us to whom. Where are they placed? Do you call the status report as a progressive report? Tell us, so that we don't waste a lot of time. Who is holding those reports? Sekabera, tell us. Thank you.
You see, how did this question arise? When we asked about the reports, whether Mr. Sekabera was making them, the governor made a statement. He said he does not recollect his office receiving these reports. Mr. Sekabera then informed the committee that actually he was not reporting directly to the governor. He was reporting to his supervisor. That is why we called in Mchala Matovu, Mr. Obo, and Mrs. Vajenda. Now, Mrs. Vajenda and Mrs. Matov agreed that they received the reports. If they received them, where are they? I asked Mrs. Matov, when she was handing over, did she hand over these reports? And if I didn't get you correct, you remind me. But the record shows that actually you said you did not hand over this exact report. Not so? Because if you handed over, then they would be in the handover report. Because that's why we have reports. Two, Mrs. Vajenda said she handed over these reports. Mr. Twino, the one she handed over the office to, say, what you handed over to me is this. And it is in the handover report. And those are not there. So I have asked the bank to bring the files which were handed over. These two, not the entire lot, but these two, where Mrs. Vajenda says they were. And we see whether they are there or not. Because it will cause a big problem about documents in the bank and about officers. Sewungu's hand has been up for quite a long time.
Mr. Chairman, the one thing I want to clear from Mrs. Vajenda, that we as the members of parliament don't think we don't know what's meant by progressive reports. You see, Mr. Chairman, we are paying a lot of attention to what these people are saying. And when you read out what she gave in, handed over, what you are holding actually, you read through that paper. I may not remember everything you have been asking. She has been trying to explain that where there is a matter of legal, there was some progress written there by her. And Mr. Chairman, me, I'm getting a problem. The governor says never got reports. Matovu says reports, Mrs. Matovu, next to me, not very far from here, has confirmed that she got reports and is even insisting that they might be. Actually, the right word from what should have been, they should be because she left. They can't be might. They should be because she left them there. Mr. Sekabira says he handed them to Bajenda. And Mr. Twino says there is no report I got. That's why I asked somebody who got them to read them to you. So, Mr. Chairman, in our rules of procedure, we have rule 205, special powers of the committee, 205 D3, comparing production of documents by witnesses. You have to invoke your powers. These three are playing ping pong here. Rule, give them CIDs, they go to Bank of Uganda, they were in that office, they bring reports. Otherwise, you are going to get the same reports that they gave you that you have already called stationary. Could you rule, Mr. Chairman? This committee always has CID. They should go with them, the three of them. There is no place that is guarded like a Bank of Uganda. Members, I don't know if you have ever gone to Bank of Uganda. Just allowing you to enter, accessing their entrance is so difficult. And there is a belief somewhere. We have allegation that some documents were stolen from this bank. Among these people.
No.
I'm saying an allegation.
No. And I want
but
that.
As I conclude, invoke your powers, Mr. Chairman. Direct these people to go.
Honorable Seung, I want a record that would not be speculative. I want a record that does not send bad signals to our sector. But that does not mean that we don't bring out the facts. So we will not speculate whether they were stolen or not until we have evidence.
So, Mr. Chairman, you would ask me where do I get the allegation from?
I'm not going to interrogate that.
Yeah, but Mr. Chairman,
honorable colleagues, I must make a ruling on the application you have been making since yesterday.
No, Mr. Chairman, you have issues.
Before you make a ruling, Mr. Chairman,
please. I need to invoke the powers of the Constitution and our rules to sort out this problem. Governor, this matter has reached a point where we need to find out whether these reports are there or not, or whether the reports are being, they are being withheld. It's about the reports, not about now individuals, because the powers we have are within the Constitution and within the rules. Because now I want to use these powers vested upon this committee to compare.
No.
I am therefore directing the executive director, banker supervision, to produce all the files, not now these two, all the files that were handed over by the then Executive Director, Banker Supervision, Mrs. Justine Vagenda, to the now Executive Director, Banker Supervision, and the files handed over, where's my list? They are They are 11. I think XI is 11. This afternoon, the files being requested for are in regard to Greenland Bank, because that's the query. I don't want the entire lot, but just the subject of this conversation, Greenland Bank. Afterwards, we shall use this case to see whether what happened with Cooperative Bank and ICB was the same.
Okay, let me look for money.
Okay.
Necessary.
Are you the Executive Director, Banker Supervision, sir?
What is your number?
Okay. I'll ask you when your time comes. Can we receive them by
Okay, I'm going to speak.
copy of letter? Is there any of this file which is confidential? Because that will also have a way of handling it with the members.
Mr. Chairman, in the submission I shall indicate which parts are.
Which parts of it are confidential? Yes. So that answers the point of procedure that has been coming over and over again since yesterday. I think this is the appropriate time for us to exercise these powers. I don't think this meeting would be very much useful to proceed with before we sort this problem out. Because this sorts out almost the next two queries. It will be easier for us to move. And colleagues, I'll adjourn this meeting to 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Chair, before
However, the Bank of Uganda will come at 10:30 tomorrow. So we are going to have an internal meeting for half hours before we interact with Bank of Uganda.
Chair, before you adjourn, we've only seen one appointment letter of Mr. Sekabira for liquidation of Greenland Bank. Can we have the subsequent appointment letters also produced? And then we also need to find out, because his salary was increased from 930 to 2,280,000. Can we also get to know whether he continued getting that money to date?
Chair, additional information, Chair.
Because I've already, I think,
Chair, did you hear what I was saying?
No, when I'm not hearing, it means you are the one sharing,
yes.
And whatever you said is a ruling.
Chair, additional information, Chair.
Sorry, before Honorable Nathan Itungo comes in, would request that these files that had been earlier submitted be withdrawn, because they are not so much relevant to what we are doing, Mr. Twine. Yeah? These how many are they? 6. And please make sure acknowledge all your files. They are there. Okay? Can I have...
Mr. Chairman, there were some original documents I was trying to hand over to you as we requested.
Yes, can we have them? Let's have the original documents. But the meeting will resume tomorrow after we've received those documents this afternoon, and we have had an internal meeting together for 1.5 hours before. At 10:30, we meet the Governor, Bank of Uganda, and his team. Yes, can we have that?
Mr. Chairman, like I said, there was the memo and the payment of per diem to Mr. Sekabira, which addresses some of the issues being raised.
Yes.
Perhaps together with the terms of reference. Then you had requested for copies of the letters of the notices issued to the proof of call of creditors.
Yes.
So there's one invitation of creditors of Cooperative Bank, Greenland Bank, and International Credit Bank. This was issued in 24th April 2006. So I'm giving you a copy.
Chair, this is not what I've asked. You're saying it relates to the issue of the allowances Mr. Sekabira was getting. This is an appointment letter.
NTV, turning on your world.
Uganda currently hosts over 1 million refugees from diverse neighboring countries. The refugee hosting areas are among the poorest and less developed sub-regions in Uganda. The presence of refugees undermines the coping abilities of host communities by increasing demand and competition for natural resources, food, and basic socio-economic services. Join us here on NTV this Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. on 22nd November with Honorable Hilary Onek, the Minister of Relief, Disaster Preparedness and Refugees, to discuss the measures being undertaken to support the communities displaced by refugees through the Development Response to Displacement Impacts Project under the Office of the Prime Minister.
This was another planning in that place, and this was strange, and it was given to me in a very strange and mysterious way as well.
Their lives ought to exemplify a dimension that is beyond the comprehension of the intellect, of the rationale.
This is a live broadcast from heaven.